How's it going, everybody? Good morning. This is yours truly, Rama Screen, covering movies, TV, and entertainment. YouTube Live. How's it going? All right, so today is Sunday, June 16th, 2019, and that means it's Father's Day. So happy Father's Day to all of you Rama Screen supporters, Rama Screen fans out there who are fathers, if you are dads, wherever you are. Today is your day. So enjoy yourselves with your loved ones. Hopefully, they get you some cool gifts, some cool Father's Day gifts. I don't know, maybe a fancy wristwatch, or hell, maybe it could just be a night out, dinner somewhere at your favorite restaurant. But I'm sure they're planning something for you right now as we speak. So, happy Father's Day to all of you cinephiles, movie fans out there who are dads. Thank you for all that you guys do. All right, so I'm here to give you my live review of Swamp Thing, the series on DC Universe. This is the latest episode, season one, new episode three, which aired this past Friday, June 14th, and it's titled "He Speaks." I wasn't able to do this review this past Friday because I was out covering Dances with Films, but I got to watch it last night and I want to give you my 2 cents of it. So, heads up, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. This review is mainly for those of you, my fellow Swamp Thing, who have also watched this past Friday's episode. Okay, if you recall, I was gaga or like stoked, or what's the word I'm looking for here? I was over the moon about the first two episodes, the pilot episode and the second episode. I love them. I thought they were great, and I had no problem with the show being, Southern Gothic horror style instead of your typical revenge, straight on good guy versus bad guy, villain kind of revenge kind of story. So I like that. Now, in this third episode, unfortunately, I noticed some parts, some elements, some things about the show or this episode particularly that made me not so happy about Swamp Thing. So I'll break it down for you. I have the notes here on my screen. So let's start with Kevin Durant's character. Kevin Durant plays this scientist named Jason Woodrow. I hope I pronounced that last name correctly. So he gets hired by Avery Sunderland, played by Will Patton. Sunderland, of course, is the richest guy, supposedly the richest guy in that area or region. And he's obsessed with the swamp. He's obsessed with trying to find, the power of the swamp. Because he's one of those zealots, rich zealots, billionaire zealots, who believes that if we can exploit the powers of the swamp and to our own benefit, ha 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 ha. Well, he didn't do the laugh, but so anyway, Jason works for him, and it has to do, if you recall from last week's episode, it has to do with this thing called accelerant um, that he's been experimenting on. I don't know the details of it, but uh, Sunderland is very angry at Jason because he thinks that this whole accelerant, this whole experiment, is the root cause of why the townsfolk has been sick, has been infected by whatever this strange thing is from the swamp. So that's what happened last week, right? Now, in this episode, we find out a bit more about Jason's motivation. If you ever wonder, like, why is he doing this? Why is he a scientist working for Sunderland? Why is he hell bent on this specific accelerant research thing? Well, it's revealed in this episode that his wife, Jason Woodard's wife, um, is suffering from some sort of an early onset dementia or early onset Alzheimer. Not sure the specific, but the point is she's losing her memory. There's a scene in this episode where she forgets to take her pills, but turns out she already did her take. Excuse me. Turns out she already did take her pills like a minute ago, and then Jason consoles her. So my point is that um, that is not uncommon, and I find that to be kind of not necessarily disappointing, but I wish the writers had come up with a more original take for the backstory and the motivation for Jason, as opposed to like, oh, his wife is slowly deteriorating, so he has to find a cure for her. It's like it's the most textbook old school motivation for scientists on any sci-fi drama or movies. I mean, let me give you an example. Victor Fries, right? Mr. Freeze. His motivation is to save his wife. What else? What else? That scientist in the series The Passage that got canceled this past season. The Passage on Fox. It was about vampires. Do you remember that? The scientist, the head scientist, I think he's played by Henry Ian Cusick, and his motivation is the same thing. Oh, my wife, has amnesia, has Alzheimer's, whatever, um, early onset dementia, whatever, and then so I gotta find the cure, and these vampires, whatever they have, can cure my wife. So here we go again. So my reaction to the revelation of Kevin Durant's character's motivation, I'm like, really, another round of this? I know that by now originality is just a myth that people or talents or writers basically are just trying to rehash what's already established out there and put a spin to it, put their own spin to it. I get it, I get it, I get it. But when it comes to this concept, my wife is dying, therefore I have to find a cure. I'm a scientist, and I'll find a billionaire that can invest me into it. And like, it, it, it's there's no spin. You know what I'm saying? There's no spin to the passage or Gotham or this one something. There's nothing unique about each of them. They're just carbon copies of the same motivations. Like, so after a while, at least for me who watches TV like I breathe air, I find it to be like, oh man, this again, you know? I think there is a way to give the TV scientists motivation that's not, because they're either usually straight up villains, or like this, my wife is dying. There's got to be another route, another motivation that one that hasn't been used one too many times or too often. So that's first on my note. The second one, just a quick. Let's see here. I forget the character's name. I want to get the character's name correctly. I think the name is Liz Tremaine, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. Okay, so the actress name is Maria Sten. Maria Sten, and she is an actress, writer, filmmaker from Denmark, of Danish and Swedish heritage, but ethnicity is Congolese. So anyway, she plays Liz Tremaine, um, this character who is friends with Abby Arcane, and Liz, you know, apparently she's also a part of the LGBTQ community. She resides in that region with her partner. So I got nothing wrong. I mean, I got no problem with that. Right? There's nothing wrong with LGBTQ representation, and that's good. That's wonderful. But in this episode, they're trying to make her out to be some kind of this persistent journalist that's trying to uncover the truth, and that's fine too. But I just don't find her performance to be convincing. There are moments in this episode in particular when she spends time with Abby Arcane, shares heart to heart talk, or when she tries to intimidate that one attorney or banker. I should say not attorney, a banker who ends up also tells Sunderland the bad news in this episode. Well, anyway, when Liz Tremaine confronts him, and when Liz has a heart to heart talk with Abby, I'm not getting anything out of Maria Stain's performance. No offense, but here's the thing. I've mentioned to you many times, 1,000 times. I'm like a broken record by now. That film and TV live and breathe right here in this frame. Right? I know I make it look like an Egyptian dance there. Um, okay, so um, yeah, it's all in the face. Sometimes of course there's waist up shot or a wide shot, and then the actors can be free to do more with their body or expressions, as opposed to just the face. But for the majority of the time, it's right here. So if you can't sell it to the audience, now I watched this masterclass commercial with Helen Mirren, and she's one of the greatest actors of all time, as we all know. But in that commercial, I only saw a snippet of it. But she said like, "Oh, don't worry about what your face can convey. It's all in here. It's all the expression. You got to think like your characters think." And that's true. That's true. Those are good advice. But at the same time, if you feel it here and here, but you know, it doesn't translate right here, because that's what the audience could see right here. They can't see, what you think or what's in your heart. So it has to actually project also through here. And if you can't sell that, then you're a waste of frame. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be mean, but I feel like she is, so far at least in this season one, that Maria Sten is the weakest link on this show, performance wise. So that's another one. Another note that I have, that's disappointment about this episode. All right, so let's get on to the next one. With regards to, I'll save the best for last. Abby Arcane and Swamp Thing. With regards to Will Patton, Will Patton's character, Sunderland, right? Um, Avery Sunderland, and the revelation in this episode that turns out he may have had a fling or an affair with Jennifer Beals' character, Lucilla Cable. Now, Lucilla, as you know from last week's episode, she turns out she is the mother of that one cop, and Lucilla is also a cop. She's a veteran, seasoned cop. Matt Cable, there you go. And so she's the mother of Matt, and she warns Matt, "Hey, I know you have a crush on Abby Arcane for like forever, but that girl is not good news, man. Trouble follows her. Like I'm just worried for you as I'm your mother. Um, but as you can see from this episode, Matt is still hung up on Abby Arcane. So they go way back. They go way back. So Matt has had a crush on Abby for a while, and now that Abby is back, Matt's like, "Oh my god! It's like the universe is telling me I got another chance. Now this is my chance now. I'm not letting her go again." Um, so anyway, the revelation in this episode is that Avery Sunderland and Lucilla Cable may have had an affair. Um, but it's done in a very very suggestive way. Nothing too graphic in this episode. Like they have a drink, and then Avery tries to make a move, and then you can see Lucilla responding to that move. But at the last minute, there's a noise breaks, and then she's like, "Oh, she's having second thoughts. Oh, your wife is here in the house." We can't do this while your wife's in the house. Are you insane? And Avery's like, no, don't go. Um, I think though that this will be one of those subplots or one of those layers that, if I were to theorize it or predict, speculate, not predict, speculate, I think this is going to be one of those subplots that will end up being abandoned. By that I mean, um, I I think the writers just wanted to have something to give Lucilla Cable more dimension. In addition to just her being a cop's mom, or herself is a cop. They're just like, oh, what if we give Avery and Lucilla some wink wink, nudge nudge, but I think it's gonna be one of those where after a few episodes down the road, the focus will shift to everything else, and Lucilla will be left, being one dimensional character again. But that's just my speculation, my theory. I might be wrong, okay, but my point is that this whole thing trying to give you the audience a sense like, ooh, an affair, scandalous. Like, ah, it's like you're reaching here. You desperately want to give this additional shade to Lucilla and Avery that, frankly, I don't think audiences would care much about. And once the entire focus of the story, the season one story arc, shifts to something much bigger, much more encompassing, much more that involves the entire town. This whole little affair thing will end up being a little footnote that, forgotten in this whole show, in my opinion. So, I find that whole thing to be really just reaching, man. Just like the writers, like, yeah, might as well. Let's give him this, even though we're not gonna meddle too much about it later down the road. That's my speculation. So but to that point, I'm saying that Jennifer Beals, who is a wonderful actress, one of my favorites, because I love Flashdance. I'm a big fan of the Taken series, which unfortunately got canceled too early, in my opinion. Jennifer Beals deserves better. Deserves better than just this cop that may or may not have had an affair with Avery Sunderland. I think the writers could do better in coming up with, if they want to give something more about Lucilla Cable, they could, do better on that front for Jennifer Beals, because she deserves better. So, that's my thing on that note. All right, so let's get to the last. I'm saving the best for last. Um, Abby Arcane and Swamp Thing. Okay, so the title of this episode is "He Speaks," and we get to hear Swamp Thing speaks in this episode, and that's cool. And as you know, the Swamp Thing is played by Derek Mears. Alec Holland is played by, Andy Bean, and Andy Bean shows up in this whole kind of dreamscape scene where he confronts, or rather, the person that he killed last episode, the one that gets mangled, to pieces, pulled apart. Remember that? The bad guy, that Swamp Thing kind of, using his vines or using his swamp power, pull that guy, apart, limb to limb. Well, anyway, that guy shows up in this dreamscape scene and confronts, Alec Holland. And so, before I go further, I just want to say, I remember I told you guys that is one of the appeals. One of the things that I find appealing about this show is that it reminds me of the 1970s Incredible Hulk that I grew up watching. I grew up watching the reruns, of course. But anyway, Bill Bixby playing David Banner, and then Lou Ferrigno played the Hulk. And so in each episode, we still see Bill Bixby hitchhiking, getting odd jobs from town to town, and then when he gets pissed, he becomes the Hulk, played by Lou Ferrigno. So it's like, okay, Alec Holland and Swamp Thing will have that kind of dynamic, but the difference, of course, Alec Holland is technically dead, and Swamp Thing, just Swamp Thing. That's the one that takes over. But we still get to see Alec Holland from time to time. Uh, Case in point in this episode, flashback. So this episode is telling us, like, yes, you won't see the last of Andy Bean, but he'll only show up in dreamscapes or nightmares or flashbacks or any of those deals. And so it's good to see Andy Bean back again, even for just a few minutes as Alec Holland. Now, the not necessarily the villain, but the the evil force, I guess you could say, that Swamp Thing confronts in this episode, um, is not necessarily a solid entity. What they did is that they possessed the body of the bad guy that got pulled apart limb to limb, and 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 it shows up in a form of lots of bugs and this critters. And oh man, it is so cringy, man. Watching those bugs just like creeping through the cracks of the woods and and coming to the house. And then when Swamp Thing defeats him, you see, the body just evaporates itself again and then turns into bugs again. Oh man, it just, it's like it sends chills down your spine. It's like, oh, unless you are into bugs, you probably would find that very or pretty cool. Some people I know, or some people in Asia, they eat bugs. And if you watch Anthony Bourdain's shows or whatnot, you'll see people in Asia kind of eat bugs in their own fried bugs or whatever in their own kind of way. So if you don't hate bugs, then you don't mind what happens in this episode. But if you do, if you find bugs to be very irritating and makes you cringy, like it did me, then yeah, um, just a heads up, you will feel you will feel uncomfortable watching this episode. Um, and lastly, I, here's the biggest, I think, disappointment. Not necessarily disappointment. I would say, let me rephrase that. This is what the show falls short on, in my opinion. All right. So what happens in this episode is that it is suggested, because Swamp Thing saves Abby Arcane from this bug infested carcass, bug possessed body of the guy that he pulled limb to limb. Anyway, so he saves Abby Arcane, and Abby's like, Alec, is that you? And then Something kind of pulls her hair aside, just like Alec did. And then that's how Abby remembers, like, oh, so that's you, Alec. Um, and then later on in this episode, you see Abby Arcane dancing with Matt Gable, and then Swamp Thing from the distance, he sees them, and it suggested that maybe Swamp Thing is jealous that Abby gets to dance with Matt, but not him. So my point is that I don't know, man. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like there was not enough time invested in those two, Abby Arcane and Alec Holland, when before Alec Holland became Swamp Thing. There's not much time invested in developing that fling or relationship. The only time was that when he gives her the beer, remember that, or the alcohol, and then he does the hair thing. That was the only time when, oh, there could be something here. You know what I'm saying? But I was like, that's just one time. That's just like one brief moment. So, um, for the show, for the writers to make it seem as if like, oh my god, that Abby Arcane has feelings for Swamp Thing because of because she had feelings of alcohol, it's simply unfounded. There's nothing there established just yet. You know, that's why a lot of you out there has had said to me like, oh, the pilot episode was so boring. Like he was human the entire time. Like he didn't become Swamp Thing until the last minute. What the heck was that, man? But if you ask me, I would have loved it if they had gone through the second episode with Alec Holland still being Alec Holland. You know, he hasn't turned yet. Because then maybe there could be the next moment of fling, or maybe they could go out and actually develop feelings, and then when he dies, she feels grief and loss, you know, um, and she misses him, and then the whole thing with Swamp Thing being jealous at Abby, and Abby kind of desires Swamp Thing, then that whole thing would be reasonable, would be understandable because they have this little history. But there's nothing there. It hasn't been fully developed nor established. So for the writers to sell that to us to make it seem as if like I get it though. I get it though. A lot of us TV fans, we enjoy the tension, right? Will she the tension of sexual chemistry tension, like will they, won't they, that's what gets us to liking stories like Mulder and Scully in the X-Files. Will they or won't they, that's it's always fun that way. I get it, I get it. But Mulder and Scully have spent time together for a long time, so it's it's understandable the will they, won't they speculation around them. Whereas Abby and our Alec, they only have that one brief moment, man. I just don't find it to be enough to justify the jealousy and Abby's curiosity and desire. And also it explains why when that in this episode when Swamp Thing does the hair, pulling back the hair of Abby Arkenya, like usually you would expect the character Abby Arcane or any character in her shoes, right? The female, to when she realized, oh, you're Alec, like, and then you would see tear, like one little tear just runs down her cheek. That would make like the perfect effect, right, for emotion. Um, but there's nothing here, and for a split second, I was like, how come she doesn't feel emotionally, I don't know, shocked and devastated finding out that that's Alec? Like, how come there's nothing there? And then the second and the next second, I'm like, oh, of course they don't really have history. They don't really have history. They only know each other for that brief moment. Fair enough. Um, and another thing also, like when Swamp Thing tells her the secret, right, as to how to heal those people or townsfolk that are sick, and the Swamp Thing says, about the swamp, it's not fighting, it's fighting back. That's cool. That's a great line. But and then it but it just after that it cuts to Abby Arcane, going into the to her facility, tries to figure that out. I just feel like, okay, you just found out, you Abby Arcane, you just found out that this creature in front of you is Alec all along. And so there's not there's no build up from there. You just like, oh, you're Alec. Yeah, the swamp is fighting us. It's not fighting, it's fighting back. Boom, it cuts to the I hate it when movies or TV does that, man. Like you don't have to milk it, but at least like you just discover that this guy, this creature, like you must have a million questions for him, right? Right? We want to know, we the audience want to see how that exchange or dialogue continues, not just cuts to curing the townsfolk. Or maybe you could argue. Hopefully, I'm hoping at the very least that maybe in the next episode or subsequent episodes that we'll come back to that cabin again, and then maybe we'll see more of the conversation between Abby and Swamp Thing, because I think that part deserves an entire or a full episode. You know, where she just has conversation with Swamp Thing, like, "You're Alec. Like, how'd you become like this? What happened to you?" And like, and maybe maybe she'll have her Beauty and the Beast kind of moment, where she touches him and, like, still baffled, curious, because he's a scientist. She has long conversation overnight, and like something like that, something to that effect, man. You can't just like drop this truth on her lab and then just cut to a scene of her curing townsfolk. I'm like, take us back to that cabin again. I want to see more of that. So I feel cheated out of that. I think that this episode, in many ways, shows how this series dropped its ball from time to time, or how it fumbles from time to time. I still like the show. I still like that it's horror based. Just like the thing with Avery Sunderland's wife, Maria Sunderland. She's still coping with the ghost of her dead daughter. I like that whole part. The jump scares regarding, oh my God, Shauna shows up in the mirror, or Shauna tells her mom, like, oh, dad is unfaithful. I like that whole thing. I don't have any complaint in that one. So as far as it being horror genre, I'm still cool with it. But there's these little details that I think need to be taken care of by the writers, and make sure that you know that they're not left hanging. Um, I want to see more of that Abby. Like, you titled the episode "He Speaks," and yet he only speaks for like few seconds. Come on, man. Come on. Ay, ay, ay. So those are the notes that I have. Those are the things about this show that I think, or this episode at the very least, that make that gives evidence or gives proof that this show has a lot of work to do to make itself better. And I don't know if it's gonna get better, because all ten episodes have been shot, have been filmed, and we're not gonna get season two. So we'll see. We'll see. Right now, we're at the mercy of whatever they have written or made for us in the next, episodes 4 through 10. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's my long rant, my review of Swamp Thing season 1, episode 3, titled "He Speaks." He barely speaks. They should have titled "He Barely Speaks." Share your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, subscribe to my channel and press that like button. And if you can help support this channel, please do so at patreon.com/ramascreen. That's patreon.com/ramascreen. Let's rock this.